Watch out. We currently have 2 TV shows synchronized swimming within the turbulent waters of spin-offs. Despite their similarities, most people would agree Rings of Power and House of the Dragon have succeeded and failed to varying levels. Professor Denham postulates that this can be attributed to their varying levels of realism. A 10-year-old might be quick to tell me that neither of these shows feel real because they have magical rings and dragons and incest, to which I would say, you shouldn't know about incest, but also you're a child and your argument is poorly constructed. Of course these shows are set within a fantastical genre, but if that was enough to stop stories from cathartically mirroring our own lives, then no one would have tattoos of Spider-Man or Harry Potter or Bake Off. I have some perspective on this, because in 2017 I was working at Amazon's streaming service when they were negotiating the rights to Rings of Power. I was there the day the strength of men failed. On paper, these shows have so much in common and yet are executed so oppositely they make for the most interesting case study I've ever seen on TV. Watching them is like seeing 2 twins separated at birth, reuniting at summer camp, except they're both British.
I have class and you don't. Why I oughta.
Open your mind and unclench your butthole. Despite being the biggest fantasy show on TV, the most important things about House of the Dragon have nothing to do with what we associate as the fantasy genre. Dragons, castles, magic, these things are garnishes. They're a sexy 2-dimensional backdrop intended to make us forget that Westeros is just medieval New Jersey. This device is so effective that you might tell me to shut up because a child on a dragon being murdered by a larger child on a larger dragon doesn't resemble your life, but it does. Don't let the eye patch fool you. You went to school with this psycho. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah, that kid. Behind the dragons and eye patches, this conflict boils down to a familiar escalated squabble between children. The type of nasty little bullying everyone has either seen or been a part of. The truth is that if you've ever eaten Thanksgiving dinner with extended relatives, you have experienced the core tensions that drive the biggest fantasy show in the world. Everyone has seen a fraught relationship between a daughter and her new weirdly young stepmom. Drunken uncles being insane. Frail fathers wishing everyone would just be nice for a goddamn second. House of the Dragon, particularly its 2nd season, is nowhere close to a perfect show, but its calculated use of the fantasy genre as an added spice to an already compelling entree goes a long way to explain why. Despite the criticism Rings of Power has received, one of its biggest and least spoken of failings is its relationship to the fantasy genre it dwells within. Where House of the Dragon uses but does not depend upon its genre, Rings of Power's fantasy setting and expensive brand name licensing is the core around which its stories and characters revolve. These inverse approaches to storytelling make for a particularly cool comparison, dude. But Rings of Power doesn't merely take place within a fantasy setting, it takes place within the fantasy setting. Even George R.R. Martin refers to Tolkien's impact on fantasy fiction as
modern fantasy largely grew out of the work of J.R.R. Tolkien and his great landmark Lord of the Rings, which looms over all fantasy like a mountain, and everybody else is operating in the shadow of Tolkien and what he did.
Middle-earth isn't ibuprofen, it's Advil, goddammit, and Amazon spent a lot of money for that registered trademark. In 2017, I was working at Amazon's streaming service when they were negotiating the rights to Rings of Power. I don't say this to impress you, there's nothing impressive about working with Satan. I bring it up because it speaks to Amazon's perspective for making Rings of Power the way they are. The department next to mine was known as the Game of Thrones department because Jeff Bezos really liked Game of Thrones and wanted to purchase the rights to the next big fantasy thing. To my eyes, Amazon's emphasis from the beginning wasn't to write something good, it was to purchase something good and figure out the rest later. You could say that Amazon's cart was purchased well before its horse. In an ironic twist of fate, they bought the rights to the thing that inspired the thing they named the department after. Yeah, for $250 million. I don't know about you, but if I paid that much to be able to say the word mithril, I would use it in every sentence.
Mithril.
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 You don't even have to dislike Rings of Power to agree that much of the show's plot is hinged around the question of which beloved and expensive character will this unnamed person wearing rags turn out to be. We're not invested in the Stranger or Halbrand because they did anything worthy of our investment. If we're still invested, it's because we're squinting at the name tags sticky to their robes, or sometimes not squinting. Is he Sauron? He's introduced as a flaming eye and these people call him Sauron, but wait, he said something to a hobbit that Gandalf said to a hobbit. Is he Gandalf?
Always follow your nose.
always follow your nose.
I can't overemphasize how opposite this kind of storytelling is to House of the Dragon, because if Gandalf was written as a clearly defined version of Gandalf from the beginning, it would have extinguished his all-important, mysterious identity. It would have destroyed Amazon's whole peekaboo method of storytelling. Even the plotline that goes beyond the geographical bounds of what we know, Rune, the Far East, a region of infinite storytelling possibilities, immediately doubles back to tell us that these characters are searching for the registered trademark Shire. With Rings of Power, all literal and metaphorical roads lead back to the expensive rights they purchased. House of the Dragon's Thanksgiving dinner dynamics work because they give the audience something real to grasp onto, something grounded enough to offset the tribbles. Amazon's show is hinged around the tribbles. And in the absence of identifiable human beings, audiences are left trying to connect with a wizard searching for magical stars, or elves dying because they don't have enough of a mystical rock. The irony of Amazon so tightly shackling Rings of Power to pre-existing work is that it disincentivizes the show from ever growing into something new and exciting. Something like the beloved work they spent so much money trying to license in the first place. Why are they doing this? But why listen to me when Tolkien and Martin describe it themselves? George R.R. Martin once inadvertently explained why Rings of Power fails to strike the chord of reality that made Tolkien's work special.
Tolkien's greatest invention that grounded this in reality so much was the characters who struggle with the temptation of the ring.
You must take it!
Don't tempt me, Frodo.
They're all fighting these battles inside their hearts. That can take place anywhere, in any time, in any space in all of human history.
The Lord of the Rings is grounded within this internal reality. It's something that Tolkien himself referred to as...
People do not fully understand the difference between an allegory and an application.
I've already made a video about this difference, but application was Tolkien's desire to leave room in his text for readers to find their own connection points. Because of this, the core tensions of The Lord of the Rings could exist in any time or genre, not just fantasy. The Lord of the Rings and House of the Dragon in its best moments feel real because everything that's unreal about it is peripheral to the story it's telling. But imagine if you stripped Rings of Power of its fantasy trappings and iconic name tags. You wouldn't have a show anymore. House of the Dragon's internal realities, its application, can be seen as far back as Season 1, Episode 1. Its premise of the oldest male child being given the keys to the family business instead of the actual oldest child isn't far-fetched fantasy. The show could as easily be about a patriarch bequeathing a chain of moderately successful bakeries as it is about bequeathing the Iron Throne. It doesn't stretch your imagination to see the characters of House of the Dragon and Succession swapping genres. This flexibility is the result of clearly written and defined characters. It doesn't matter where you drop them, they'll still be themselves. I was wrong. These shows aren't The Parent Trap, because in that, both sisters are cool.